All right, y'all. It's a new SEC podcast. I'm Randall Ledet Jr. We got Hunter Ziesman here. All the conference championship football is over. We're recording here at 2 o'clock Eastern. So the 12-team CFP has officially been announced, and the full 25 rankings have been announced as well. A lot to take away from Saturday and Friday. A lot to look forward to when it comes to the playoffs coming up here in the next couple of weeks. Hunter, thoughts on the action this weekend and thoughts going forward?
Yeah, from this weekend, I mean, there's a couple things to point to. A lot of people talking about certain things here and there. I think a big one to take away from how this worked was the way that teams are seeded. I think it's important as ever this year where you don't have the automatic 4 buys. It matters the fact that Ohio State's went to 2 as opposed to where I would probably see them at 3 or 4 in lieu of the other conference champions kind of filling in those 2 or 3 spots because of how the bracket lays out, especially because we're going to have 2 G5 schools that have double-digit spreads, how those then play into, the games that predate them. A lot to take away. I mean, we saw the Notre Dame flip with Miami. We saw Alabama not drop. BYU kind of still sitting on the outside in. ACC not getting their champion in. So there's just a lot to take away, but I think they got a lot of stuff right here.
I agree with you. It's definitely a lot to take away, especially the Notre Dame swap between Miami and people have talked about it because both those teams didn't play this past weekend. I was on the record of thinking that you talked about it, right? Because this year the top 4 spots are not directly tied to conference champions. Last season, Ohio State would have been the 5th seed. This year we see Oregon's the 5th seed, right? And so it gave room for Ohio State to be the 2 seed. We saw Texas Tech as a conference champion as a 4 seed. I personally thought that it should have been Indiana number 1. Great winning for them in the Big Ten championship. I would have had Georgia at 2. I thought the SEC I think the SEC is the best conference this year personally, but Indiana's undefeated, so I would have kept them at 1. I would have put Georgia at 2. I would have put Texas Tech at 3. 2 dominating wins against BYU, put them at 3. And I would have put Ohio State at 4. Still a good spot. You still get your first round bye. But the committee, felt that 1 and 2 should have swapped. So no harm, no foul. It doesn't really change too much, but definitely would have probably, and honestly, it probably favors Texas Tech to be at a 4 seed with the matchup potentially with playing Oregon versus playing an A&M team or a Miami team.
We saw very, very clearly that they weren't going to really penalize conference championship losers. And that kind of held true across the board. And one of the things we had talked about before is I don't think that they'll drop out of their specific tier within the playoffs, whether that's a bye, a home game, an away game, or out. None of the conference losers left their respective portion of the bracket. So Ohio State losing, they still kept their bye. Alabama losing, still kept their away game. BYU was already on the outside looking in. That didn't change. So I think that is kind of a part of this here is that they weren't going to penalize those teams. And I think that's why Ohio State only dropped 1. But, from an undefeated season to now, that being their only loss, I could see why they're at 2. Now they're going to play Miami or Texas A&M. Georgia going to play Tulane or Ole Miss, where, depending on if they flipped, I don't know which one. Answer that, anyone listening can answer that for themselves, which is a more favorable position because it would be a rematch for Georgia and Ole Miss if Ole Miss does win versus Tulane, which is a rematch in itself.
Which is also a rematch. Yeah, it's definitely something interesting. The committee had a tough job these last 2 seasons having to determine how do you look at conference championships. And predating that, conference championships from the Power 4 conferences, came with winning your side of the division. So sometimes we'd see these lopsided conference championships where like one team had 3 losses, the other team had 1 loss. And so, and it's like because of the auto bids and also the lack of divisions, the standings of 1 and 2 should produce 2 teams that have a shot to potentially deserve to be in the 12-team playoff. Now what that means is like, why do I say that is like, I thought they did a good job having the proper rankings going into conference championship week. And that's why we saw that Virginia was on the outside with where they were. And we saw Duke was way on the outside, but everybody else was kind of relatively either in the inside or close. BYU was right there. So I think they got the BYU call right. They hadn't necessarily proven that they have beaten other good teams as much. Like they beat Utah, obviously they beat Arizona, but you got to play that game closer. To your point around the matchups and the seeding, Yeah, it's the first round to me doesn't really provide that much excitement. I think the best game is Miami versus Texas A&M.
Yep.
We got 2 rematches, and then we have Oregon versus JMU. So, I mean, that's just my general thoughts on that. Like, not to be negative, just more of
Yep.
I would have liked to see maybe like I mean, it's tough because like it would have been either Oklahoma, Ole Miss, we've already played, and we've seen Alabama play. Maybe you get Alabama, Ole Miss, right? Like that would have been something that we haven't seen.
Yeah.
Ole Miss has been able to duck playing Alabama the last 2 seasons, which probably helped the record overall. That could have been an interesting matchup to see, and maybe you see Tulane versus Oklahoma.
Yeah. The fact that they kept some of these rematches on here, I think is a good indicator of the fact that they were looking at the teams to be ranked properly in the vacuum of potentially providing a rematch. Like I like that take of it where they weren't going to move teams around just to avoid that. Like this
Yeah,
is the team that we believe is 8. This is the team that we believe is 9. You mentioned a lot of it going right into conference week. I think the one thing that they did right this week was righting their wrong on the Miami and Notre Dame positioning. I think it's been one of the most talked about for weeks is like, what is going on with Miami and Notre Dame? The head-to-head is there between Miami and Notre Dame. They beat them. It was week 1. It matters. Count it. This week, they fixed that situation. I don't know why they didn't do it earlier. I'm glad they did it now.
but I think the real question, one of the questions for me, like I went to the SEC championship game yesterday, and the narrative was, just do we punish conference championship losers? BYU was on the outside prior to losing yesterday. Bama was on the inside prior to losing yesterday. They're still on the inside. Bama did not play a good game, and BYU did not play a good game. Bama had -3 rushing yards. I mean, that was absolute domination. Do you feel like there should have been more penalization from the committee where maybe Bama is a 10 seed and maybe Miami was a 9?
That's what I was expecting to happen. That's what I was expecting to happen. I talked about this where, the drop of someone after a loss is more the result and not the process. Alabama doesn't need to be dropped just for losing. I think you then factor in the loss. You look at a resume of Alabama and Miami side to side, loss inclusive. And then you compare those two teams. And that's where they got Alabama was ahead of Miami, even
Yeah,
inclusive of that loss, as opposed to just saying, oh, they lost. We need to punish them for that. I think you then take it into consideration when you set them next to Miami. Running's
right.
never been a part of their game the entire season. They've won games in spite of having not that bad, but similar rushing lines where it was not a factor in the game. So
Yeah, and
I appreciate the stat, and it's definitely an indicator of how the game went, but it's not their game
yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, and I asked the question to create the dialogue. I don't necessarily ask this to say like, okay, like
Mm-hmm.
I believe that Bama
Mm-hmm.
should have dropped. I think, if you compare the 2 teams, Miami has better ACC losses. Obviously, Alabama lost to Florida State, but Alabama has better wins overall. Georgia's ranked higher than Notre Dame. So
Yeah.
I think that they got it right. I think Bama at 9 looks right. I think that, Miami at 10 looks right. There's not really too much dialogue to me that's necessary on the top 12. Like you and I talked about this off camera, where people have been complaining on the internet about like which team should get in, who's deserving, what they got wrong. And I kind of agree a little bit with your rhetoric that like if you're not in the top 5 or 6, like you really don't have that much of a leg to stand on about complaining about not being in. And when I look at the teams that are between like 6 and 12 or 13, like it's a toss up. And I think the committee did the best job they could. And I think they got it
Yeah.
right personally.
Yeah. If you want to try to compare like, a Vanderbilt and Oklahoma or, some of these teams that didn't have a head to head, but have similar records, it's a toss up. Those teams didn't necessarily take care of business per se in the regular season. One thing I thought was an interesting point one of my friends brought up is, if there was an Alabama team, same record, but had lost the Georgia game during the regular season and had picked up, the win against Oklahoma or didn't lose to Florida State or something, that this drop could have looked differently. That maybe they're lessening the blowback from Alabama's poor performance in the SEC championship game because they already did beat Georgia once this year. So just before we move on from that, like, do you think that factored in the fact that
100%.
Alabama did already beat them once? That like, yeah, Georgia got them, but it's the second time.
100%. Yeah, no doubt. I think, if it was like a Texas Tech BYU situation where like that was the second time you lost to Georgia, you're out. Yeah, I 100% think that because they played already once this year and they beat Georgia at home, the only home loss they've had in like 3 or 4 seasons. Yeah, I think that 100% played a factor in this game. I sat next to some Alabama people and they were thinking that they wouldn't be in. And I think the committee set this precedent that like if you're already in prior to this week, like it's very hard to fall out. And I think the fact that they played them already and won played a huge role, no doubt.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think that that's
Yeah.
absolutely a factor. Another question for you as we look at like the way these teams shook out and how we could see this affecting going forward. I know the big question was, if you do leave an Alabama out, does that affect the national champion or the conference championship games going forward? Do we start seeing teams potentially opt out? Like, I don't want to see that. I guess another thing to now consider when you're looking at a team like Notre Dame, they didn't have really like that many marquee wins, and that's why they are getting left out. Like, they lost 2 good games. Do you think that this plays any factor into how Notre Dame schedules games going forward, their potential relationship with the ACC? Like, do you think that they start making some changes because they're like, we need to, or do they just say next year we can't lose?
Yeah, I was telling a friend, I feel like Notre Dame needs to go like at least 11-1 to make the playoffs if you're not going to be in a conference. I think Notre Dame's path to make it in is to be better than the second or third place team in the P4, or like in this case the P2, right? Like if they had a better resume than Oregon, then it's between them and Oregon. If they had a better resume than Oklahoma, it's between them and Oklahoma or Ole Miss. So I think it does affect their scheduling. It should affect their scheduling, and if that's how we're grading at-large teams, is who have you beaten, and you don't have the chance to punch your ticket with a conference championship, like the only thing you can control is to schedule a better schedule, which is still out of your control. You can actually control winning a conference if you're in a good conference. You can't control if the teams you play against are good, but we're not going to sit here and act like we thought Stanford was good when they just hired a new coach and hired a new GM, or we think that Navy is good, or we think that, like Pitt is going to be really good. Like, schedule actual teams that you think are going to be good. No shade to Arkansas. We know what it is. Like, if you're going to schedule an SEC school, schedule anybody from the
they
former
scheduled
SEC.
A&M and they lost. Like,
And they lost, right? Like, yeah, like I think that they should schedule harder, and that's your best chance. That's the way they want it to be set up, so they can honor their NBC contract and all the things they have going for that program. So yeah, I think it will affect their scheduling going forward, or it should. And on the flip side, we've seen people like Texas, AD and head coach saying maybe we shouldn't schedule as tough of out of conference games.
Yeah, and you could make that argument, but you see every other team kind of did it. A lot of other teams have done it and won that game and seen the result of that. You have an Oklahoma game, a whole Oklahoma team, they beat Michigan. You have the Texas A&M team beat Notre Dame. Alabama has the loss to Florida State. That's holding them back from a game in Tuscaloosa. So Texas losing the Ohio State game, it's one factor among the other games. Now, if they didn't,
I guess the difference
if they didn't
for Texas,
schedule it, then they would be a 2-loss team.
Yeah,
by the end. But
I guess the difference for Texas is that they scheduled the reigning national champions and the number 1 team, which at that point in time, it was number 1 versus number 2. Like, all the examples you named, those teams are ranked lower than Ohio, or have historically been ranked lower than Ohio State all season.
Yeah. But like, I mean, I got plans with a friend to go to the Alabama Virginia Tech game in like 9 years. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
We already got plans for the home and home, 9 years from now.
Right.
So I'm like, these games are scheduled so far out. That Virginia Tech team could be awesome by then. You know what I mean? Like we have Alabama has a home and home with Ohio State coming up. Like, who knows what could happen with Ohio State? They could be bad. Like we saw Michigan, they were 6-6 following their national championship year. So like, when Texas scheduled Michigan last year, they wanted the benefit of that game, even though Michigan turned out to be nobody. So
right.
That's I want to see them still schedule games. I heard Kirby's comments last night regarding the 9-game SEC schedule. And, we saw these 2 SEC teams be super banged up coming into the game, and like 9-game SEC conference schedule. You're going to see more of that. And you're going to see teams like Alabama opting out of games. They're not playing West Virginia next year. They're playing ECU. So this will all change. But I don't think that Texas got left out because they scheduled that game. They got left out because they lost 3 times.
Yeah, I think they got left out because they lost to Florida. I think if they had lost to someone better in the conference, be a little different discussion, because they obviously had great wins. I mean, off camera, I mentioned that like the A&M wins great, and the Oklahoma wins great, and in terms of teams that have proven that they could probably beat playoff teams, Texas is up in that discussion. But it's a 12 team resume comparison with the auto bids, and so the format's the format. Most impressive conference championship performance you saw between Friday and
Georgia.
Saturday? Yeah.
I think it was Georgia. And what I really liked and some of my key takeaways from that game is that what Georgia, because they stopped the run so effectively, they were able to really bring stunt looping blitzes in like heavily into their package because they didn't have to worry about Alabama running the ball. They were able to bring those looping blitzes in, and it was challenging Alabama's O-line. And I think that's the story of the game is what they were able to do there. And that's a huge thing. Super impressed by it. I originally was going out to say, Alabama played worse than Georgia played good, and that's discrediting Georgia and not really fully indicative of the game, but Alabama did play pretty poorly as well in that game. It was kind of uncharacteristic, but yeah, I was most impressed with them, and I didn't think Indiana was going to win. So
yeah, I picked Indiana, or I picked Ohio State in my college football pick'em, and I did pick Georgia to win the game on camera and in the pick'em, but I think I thought it was going to be 27-24. I think Reese Davis said the same score. I'm not saying I'm Reese Davis. I just feel like every Georgia Alabama game historically has been very close. Like the reason I bought the ticket was like, okay, I'm going to get a good football game, and it wasn't a close game. And I think Georgia did a good job of like playing mistake-free football. They had a lot of opportunities to have good field position. The block punt that put them in a good spot. The fourth down turnover on downs that put them in a good spot, and they're closer to the red zone. And just it felt like whenever if they needed 6 yards, they were going to get it. Like I felt like they could just run the ball and it was like, we're going to get these yards. Like that was something that you knew you had it in them, but like it just to see it live, like they just seemed like, all right, we're going to get 6 yards. We're going to get 7 yards. Like Frazier, Bowens, like Cash Jones, like they were just kind of having their way running the football. And then Gunner started off 2 tutties early on very easily in the first half. So
yeah, I made a note of how much they controlled short yardage situations on both sides of the ball. When Alabama found themselves in second and short, they would end up with a sack or a pressure or a tackle for loss, or Alabama would get a penalty and they would set them up longer. Georgia did a great job of getting off the field in short yardage situations and did a great job on third down in short yardage situations, getting guys open, finding ways to put their receivers in those soft spots in Alabama's coverage, which has been pretty good as the season's progressed.
Yeah. Did that game leave you for more to be desired from Ryan Williams or from Ty Simpson? We saw the Jeremy Bernard drop in the end zone. We saw the Ryan Williams drop in the end zone. Ty's obviously been operating with an offense that has been pretty one-dimensional all season. So like, it's not like it's a handicap that he's unfamiliar with. But when you think about the skill guys being down 2 running backs, but like did the skill guys leave you with more to be desired in that game?
I would say the Cuevas, him missing the game was the most impactful miss on the entire field. Not, necessarily, Jam Miller or Riley or, Overton. I think that was a huge one because he's such a good outlet. It left a lot to be desired. I made a note, and I think I texted you this, where this Alabama team is looking more like a personnel team as opposed to an execution team. Meaning, I think that a lot of what they do well and their plays are being made by playmakers. They're relying on things to happen after the catch. They're relying on guys to get open. It's less about the consistent, repeatable execution of the offense, where you don't see some of those really methodical drives that we saw earlier in the season. It's more reliant on someone making a good play. And I don't think that's super repeatable. What I got left to be desired, a big part of it was Georgia getting pressure. I looked at the stats around Ty Simpson's time to throw, and I thought watching the game, he's holding on the ball too long. And that was the case. He had just around 3 seconds on his time to throw on the game. When you're playing a team, especially coming out of half, where you start seeing that Georgia's bringing that additional pressure, you need to start play calling and doing things to get guys open sooner or being able to provide that, which is where I think Cuevas would have been a big factor.
And like you said, nothing to take away from Georgia's performance. We've obviously identified that they had the most impressive conference championship performance. Kirby, now puts the series at 2-7 against Alabama, but this one was one of the more important ones with what was at stake with the first round bye. I think what were your thoughts on the Indiana Ohio State performance, the other big P2 conference championship game?
I thought it went, scoring wise, kind of similar how we expected. If anyone listening watched our best bet segment, we went, 4 for 5, and one of the picks in that was the under on that game. And, that's how we saw it. It was a good defensive battle between these two teams. Indiana did better than I expected. I mean, truly against a good Ohio State defense, taking advantage of a couple moments, getting the interception early was a good one as well for them. So they've definitely earned the number one spot and removed any doubt that people had around the schedule that they played up to this point or how they might have looked against Penn State or anything like that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I had heard a stat that they were like top 6 in the country defensively, yards per game wise, or just overall. And I was skeptical based upon the competition with that stat. I was like, okay, like they've beaten an okay Michigan team, or they've beaten a good Michigan team. But I just was like, I mean, Ohio State's pretty good. Like, I don't think they're going to blow them out, but it's Ohio State. Ohio State just got the monkey off their back, beating Michigan first time in a couple seasons. Um, I that 4th and 1 play, the first time for Ohio State, you run a play action and you throw it to Jeremiah Smith, double teamed. I'm wondering, like, why not give it to CJ Donaldson? And then you don't get the 4th down when you go for the QB sneak, and then you miss the field goal.
I was going to ask about
end.
that.
I just feel like it was a lot of execution that they missed on, because they did a decent job controlling Mendoza. Mendoza stepped up a lot in the second half, but like, I feel like Ohio State did enough to win that game.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you about what you do on that late down. Do you kick that? Do you go for it? Because you see people saying go for it, but then we saw all the criticism for Kirby Smart in the first Alabama matchup in a very similar situation where he opted to go instead of kick.
Yeah. I mean, your defense is playing so well. I get the reasoning why you would go for it, but it's like there's like 7 or 9 minutes left in the fourth quarter. Indiana has proven they can kind of chew up clock running the football. I think you kick the field goal in foresight and hindsight. Like, you kick the field goal and like you trust your defense to get you the ball back.
They make the kick. We don't even talk about it. If they make that kick and the game goes to OT or they continue on, we don't even talk about that kick. So yeah, I could see both sides of that one. Another game I was kind of impressed with. I was impressed with Tulane, to be honest. When they played, I thought North Texas was the better squad. But I am impressed with Tulane, and I think that they have a potential opportunity. If I'm looking at the two G5 schools, who has a potential opportunity to continue through the playoff, when you're looking at Tulane and Ole Miss, who have already played, or you have JMU playing Oregon, like, let's talk a little about those games. What do you think is going to happen there?
Yeah. We did our conference championship preview, and I think I picked North Texas to win, so I was wrong there. I was wrong on my pick 'em as well. If anybody who listens to our show to this point cares about my college football pick 'em, I finished in first place though, so I will give myself that.
Good on you.
I thought that with that offense, they would have been good with Mestamaker, Caleb Dawkins. He was out for about a quarter. He got hurt in the first quarter. I think they played a role, but like, I was impressed by Tulane's defense. They were able to force a good amount of turnovers. Yes. And they just looked like the more athletic unit on the field. They looked more comfortable in that game than North Texas ever looked. That's what impressed me the most.
The defense caused a couple big swings in points in that game, for sure. And they earned this spot by winning their conference, and now here getting a rematch against Ole Miss. Didn't go super well for them the first time. It was in Oxford. Now, looking at the early line here, Ole Miss now going to be favored by 17.5. in the rematch with Tulane. What do you think? I mean, Retzlaff made the playoffs. BYU sitting on the outside. He kind of likes where he's at now.
I was thinking about that. I saw him. He was kissing his girlfriend on the sideline. Can't do that in Provo. But maybe you can. Look, I'm not a Mormon. I don't know all the rules, but there's some things I know you can't do for sure, that you can certainly do in New Orleans. But he's happy. It's funny that the G5 had at least one spot that they were going to be able to get based upon the 5 conference champions for P4s. And Tulane got it. They did their job.
It's a lot of points. It's a lot of points in a playoff game. You don't want to get caught looking ahead when you're playing one of these G5 schools. You're looking at, we're a team that's going to have to, if we win this game, we got to play Georgia again. You don't want to get caught looking ahead or get caught up in the drama around the coaching situation. I mean, I like Ole Miss to win this game. I think 17.5 points is a lot. But the way that they've been playing, I wouldn't doubt it happening for sure.
Yeah, last year's playoff was, a lot of people felt was a snooze fest. I think most of the games were won by double digits in the first round. We saw SMU, Penn State was kind of a blowout. We saw that Indiana, Notre Dame really wasn't that close. It got close at the end with a couple garbage time touchdowns. We saw what we thought was a decent Clemson team get beat pretty bad against Texas. Tulane was just so outmatched in the trenches.
Yeah.
I don't see how they can outskill them at the skill positions with what they have in the trenches to this point across the board.
Yeah.
We've recognized Ole Miss's offensive line in our team of the week. We've talked about the defensive linemen and Perkins and all these other guys on Ole Miss's defense. I just have a hard time and I don't know who's going to stop Kwan Lacey once again.
Yeah. That's what they had the trouble with last time. Like similar thing. I mean, they had trouble stopping the different things that Ole Miss could do. Had trouble moving the ball against them. So we know what this game looks like. Like I think we know who these two teams are right now.
Yeah. I'm surprised they didn't put this one as a noon game. They put I think the best game of the week at the noon game with Texas A&M and Miami in College Station, but that other one will be on at 3:30 Eastern. So.
And then the other G5 matchup, you talk about dominating in the trenches being kind of the big mismatches when you're looking at some G5 schools playing against, P4, just based on the size of the recruiting, getting some of those bigger guys. JMU, Oregon now 21.5 point favorites in Eugene.
I'm excited. We get to see the JMU coach in the Big Ten type game. He's going to UCLA next season. They've noted that he will be continuing to coach throughout the playoffs for JMU. And we saw Oregon play Liberty a couple years ago with Caden Salter at quarterback and Bo Nix at quarterback, and it was one of the worst bowl games I've ever seen. I struggle to see. I think Oregon covers 21.5 easily, based upon what I saw JMU doing against Troy.
Yeah, I'm with you. I got Oregon in this one. It's a lot of points. The other two games, though, closer. You talk about Miami, Texas A&M being one of the better games of the week. A&M 4.5 point favorites. These teams have both beat Notre Dame, so we got a common opponent there between these two. A&M, most recently losing to Texas. So looking at here, it's just a tough place to play. I mean, College Station is a tough place to play, and that's going to be a huge, huge factor here.
Yeah. I mean, A&M to this point this season, undefeated at home, of course. Only loss came to Texas and DKR. Miami has been winning some games of late, beat Pitt, obviously, beat some other teams. I'm curious to see what guys like Ruben Bain and some of what this defensive line can do to kind of create pressure on Russell Reed. We've seen when he is pressured, he doesn't play as well. But this month off gives the running back room for A&M to have some time to kind of heal up. We were talking about if Owens was going to play against Texas, he should probably be back against Miami. And so I think that to me will be the key factor for A&M.
Yeah, that's it. That's a huge part of it. And then I think, you're coming into a game as Texas A&M to potentially get a couple turnovers, in this game. And if you can get healthy with the running backs, I don't want to just pick all favorites here, but I mean, I do like A&M -4.5 too. I think being at home is a big one, except for one game. I'll talk about.
Yeah, that. I mean, I'm interested to see how it goes. The last time we saw A&M play, we saw Arch Manning kind of have his way. We saw the running backs really destroy Texas A&M's defense, and so they're facing a really good freshman receiver. I think Miami definitely has a shot. If you ask me today, I'll pick A&M, but I think it'll be very close. And we'll be doing a full preview as well.
Yeah.
So
yeah. All these games are going to be breaking down way more in depth, X's and O's, talking about them. The final one here, another rematch. We got Alabama, Oklahoma. Alabama early line on the road, -1.5. It's interesting because when they played the first time, it was more about what Alabama continued to provide Oklahoma as opposed to what Oklahoma was doing. They weren't moving the ball that effectively on offense. They haven't really been lately, but their defense is so good that they're giving their offense 50 yards to work to have to score. That was the story of the Alabama-Oklahoma game last time they played. Looking at the line here, it's can that happen twice? Is I guess the question.
Yeah. And it's really a good question of can it happen twice? You're playing, of course, in Norman this time versus before they were playing in Tuscaloosa. So it felt like it was man, Alabama should win this game. They've won 4 or 5 straight. They're humming along. I don't know what's going to happen.
They outgained him in every category.
Right? So I think that I just have a feeling it's where these two teams need to get to. I've seen Alabama get there before. I haven't necessarily seen Oklahoma get there. So what I mean by that is I think I need to see Oklahoma get up to a better passing attack. their running attack has improved. I need to see Alabama just kind of get back to passing the ball the way they have, which I've seen them do it all season. They have more weapons offensively. Defensively, I trust Alabama's defense to control John Mateer and this Oklahoma team, unless I'm seeing something I haven't seen to this point this season.
Yeah.
You should get your running back. I see why the line is the way it is, but like Venables is a defensive guru. Like you can't like, they're the only team in the playoffs that defense can play them into a win.
Yeah. This might be like a 7-6 final score kind of game.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Both defenses pretty good. Like even in the Georgia game last week with Alabama, like they didn't score on any drive except for one from their own half of the field. It was all short field, the block punt, the turnover on downs, kind of garbage time touchdown there. I'm gonna take Alabama in this one. -1.5. I think that there's been just that struggle offensively ever since like the Missouri game. And there's something with the confidence in finding the receivers and trying to hit guys in stride that if you get back to the Vanderbilt, the Missouri game, even the Tennessee game, that is a completely different Alabama team than we've seen for the past few weeks, but they're in there,
Yeah. And I'm going to take Oklahoma. I feel like I haven't seen Alabama play an impressive defensive game in quite a while. I wouldn't call the Auburn game impressive. I wouldn't call the South Carolina game defensively impressive. The Oklahoma game, they played all right defensively, but what I saw against Auburn and their ability to run the football on them, like that's what Mateer does well. You're playing at home. I think this is probably OU's best matchup to have in the first round outside of the G5 schools, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like if you're playing A&M or you're playing Ole Miss, they're going to be able to score. And I think Alabama can score, but I think defensively they've shown they can give up running the football with Georgia, with Auburn, with these other schools. So I could see Oklahoma winning this game.
Yeah. I mean, if you're Oklahoma and you're even playing like a Miami, one of those cross-conference games where you have a Miami who's a little bit more vertical than Alabama has been as of late, that could be a challenge that you haven't really seen. You've been seeing a lot of shorter ball. But we have the 4 games. We got the 4 matchups here. We got the final ranking set. Everyone's going to have, opinions on it, but it is what it is. I think that you get your, a couple teams really deserve it. The rest should be happy to be in it. I think Notre Dame could have done more to be in.
Way too early national champion. Who you got?
Yeah. Oh, way too early. I'm gonna say Georgia.
Okay.
I'm gonna take Georgia. They beat Ole Miss. I'm gonna say that Ohio State plays Texas A&M. I think we get a Georgia, Texas A&M, SEC potential hypothetical of what the SEC championship game could have been to get to the national title game, and they play Texas Tech for a national title.
Okay. All right. So I think Oregon's going to beat JMU. I think Texas Tech will beat JMU. I obviously I picked Oklahoma to beat Alabama, so it would be Oklahoma versus Indiana in the second round, and then Texas Tech versus Oregon. I got Tech advancing. I have Indiana advancing over Texas Tech. They'll be playing in the Peach Bowl in the semifinals. So it'll be Indiana versus Texas Tech in the Peach Bowl semifinals. I would take IU in that game. So I got IU in the Natty on the back half of the bracket. I think it's between Georgia and Ohio State. I have A&M winning the first round. I think the winner of Ohio State, Georgia wins the national title. I have Georgia. So I think Georgia, IU, Natty. I'm taking Georgia and Miami right now. Way too early. This could change, but based upon the championship football I've seen, what we've seen thus far, you give these guys a month off, and for the teams that are playing in the first round bye, they're not going to play till January 1st. So that's my thoughts.
Go Dogs. Go Dogs. they proved it. They proved it last night. They played great.
Stockton playing at this level takes them another level. Georgia's become an offensive school, and they're suitable on defense. It's a dangerous combo.
And I got so many comments on it, and I have to defend myself in the comments about their pressure. And the comment I made was that they're going to have a hard time winning games like this without pressure. And that was my major comment here, that people are like, oh, they've been getting pressure as of late. That's great. They did it in that game, and I think that was a key factor to them winning. So I'll still stand by it. The pressure is a key factor in winning some of these type of games. So we'll see if they can continue that, if they do end up playing, Tulane or Ole Miss. We got the 4 games. We got the lines. We had them up on the screen. Let us know what you guys think on these first 4 games, who your early pick is for the national champion. let us know what you think about the rankings. We know all the thoughts that there are around that. If you think that there should have been more punishment to Alabama, if you think that BYU is kind of getting screwed over a little bit here, because they do have some marquee wins. We have the resume comparison of these teams. Let us know what you think. We're going to be breaking down all of these games more in depth as they get a little bit closer. So be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss those as they come out. When we talk about Alabama, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Miami, we talk about, Tulane and Ole Miss in the rematch. So as always, I'm Hunter Ziesman here with Randall Ledet Jr. We're in the playoffs now. It's time to start talking some serious football. We appreciate you being here, and until next time.